Welcome back, everyone, to Public Affairs. I am your host, Kayleigh, and today I am here with Kip Curtis. So why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Thank you, Kayleigh, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. My name is Kip Curtis. First and foremost, I am a husband and father. I am married to the Associate Director of Conservation Collections at the OSU Library, and I have two adult children, Noah and Maxime, 24 and 22. I'm here, though, because I'm an associate professor of environmental history, and I've been working on a project in agriculture. My background is in U.S. history and environmental history, which is the study of humans and nature in time, and I have been in higher education since 1997, so getting close to 30 years.
Absolutely. So he's got quite a bit of background in this kind of stuff. So can you start by sharing what inspired you to launch the microfarm project back in 2017? What kind of problems were you trying to solve?
Sure, that's a really great question. I had come up to Ohio State from working in Florida at Eckerd College, where I had worked with students for about 10 years developing a schoolyard gardening program. We were putting schoolyard gardens in at-risk schools with the idea that introducing students to agriculture was probably a good activity for them, that it would sort of help them with their some of the challenges they might have in school, but it also became a really nice learning environment. So we could teach science, we could teach math, we could teach biology, and we found tremendous engagement. We started with one schoolyard garden. We had 8 by the time I was finished there. But in that process, I noticed around me in the city all these efforts to do urban agriculture. And what I noticed about urban agriculture was really ambitious organizations or really ambitious individuals decided they were going to start farming. They were going to start farming on a small scale, and they often found themselves within a year or 2 or 3 struggling with all the challenges of farming. Like, which crops should I grow? Where do I sell these crops? How do I turn this into a business? And so when I came up to Ohio State, I wanted to solve the problem of urban agriculture, and this is where the microfarm project came from. This, again, was a student-driven initiative. I worked with undergraduates to develop what we called the kind of Goldilocks urban ag site. And the idea was, you know, this isn't just gardening if you're doing urban agriculture. You're trying to sell to a market, and so you need to be able to think about what's the right scale. And that was our question. What is the smallest viable agricultural site? And the microfarm was that answer. It's a 6,000 to 8,000 square feet of growing area. It is 2 high tunnels or 1 long high tunnel, and then all the accoutrements to make that work. We built a Model 1 on the OSU campus, and we started to kind of run data on it, like, how much can you really grow? We had come up with the scaling by using data that we found online and marketing information that we found online. We wanted a site that would net about $30,000 income, which we felt was a nice supplemental income for somebody who was trying to do urban agriculture. So it fit that, but we started to grow crops, and we started to discover, well, you can grow even more crops than we thought, but we can't market them. Where do we sell these things? And the marketing question got me thinking about the fact that a single small site like that was not actually viable for the single farmer. And so we stepped back and said, well, okay, one of these won't work, but what if we put them together into a cooperative? And that's where the microfarm system emerged, was you need at least 10 of these microfarms, but 10 of these microfarms can grow and sell enough crops if you have a centralized marketing aggregation cooperative that goes out and gets all the buyers, and they can sell enough crops so they can bring in that 30,000 net, and they can support the employees necessary for the cooperative. Again, this was all mostly on paper, but we went to the ag school. We talked to a number of extension experts who were like, yeah, this makes a whole lot of sense. And then we went to the Foundation for Food and Agricultural Research, which is a farm bill sponsored granting organization that supports this research, and we applied for a grant in 2018, received it at the end of 2018. And that was essentially a $1 million matching grant that allowed us to build this whole system, train a whole group of farmers, and spend 3 years incubating it to life. Mm-hmm. That grant ended in 2021. The Richland Grow Op, which was the product of that grant, and most of the farmers we trained, as well as dozens of new ones, are still in operation in Mansfield. So the research project was ultimately a success, and we're kind of watching this success grow in Mansfield while we speak.
That's awesome. So you mentioned Mansfield. So why Mansfield? What made it the ideal place to start this?
Mansfield turned out to be a perfect place. The main reason was I'm a faculty member of the OSU Mansfield campus, and I work in my community, so this was the community to work in. Mm-hmm. But Mansfield was also right because it represented the kind of problem that we were trying to solve, which was not big city urban agriculture, but small city and small town urban agriculture. Can we build one of these in a place that, you know, anybody who knows the upper Midwest knows that the upper Midwest is dotted with small cities and small towns that since deindustrialization have really been struggling to get their economic legs under them. And we wanted to put this in as a kind of solution, a solution that could grow from the ground up in a community, create new means for wealth in households, and we hope to recover small agriculture from some of the challenges that it's facing. So Mansfield was kind of a microcosm of the upper Midwest. It was also a wonderful place to work because it was a community that was really feeling the upper Midwest Renaissance feel, you could say. They were looking for opportunities, and so they were very much willing to kind of take the risk with us. Is this something we can build? And so city leaders helped connect me with people who donated the aggregation space. And the community foundation there came up with the largest part of the matching grant that we needed in order to receive the FAR grant. Like Mansfield came in whole hog for that. And it's been just a remarkable place to work.
I love when the community members step in.
It's just, and you can't do it without community members.
No,
it's so
absolutely
much
not.
a part of it.
So for the audience members who don't know, can you explain what a microfarm aggregation system is and then how it supports small-scale farmers in that area?
Yeah, so I was describing it a little bit before, but it's a system of small farms rooted in microfarms. So the microfarm is that 6,000 to 8,000 square feet of growing area, the high tunnel so you can grow 12 months out of the year, and then the cooperative system in this really interesting way that we hadn't planned from the start simplifies the farming. It mitigates the marketing challenges. So all of my farmers go to the aggregation site in January and they get a crop plan. And so the crop plan is based on known buyers. There's already a market out there. These crops are essentially already sold. And for the farmer, that means if they grow these crops over the course of the season, they don't have to wonder about whether or not they have a market for it. They walk into that cooperative and they get a sale, they get a check at the end of the month, basically, for what's sold, and it's 95% of everything that goes through the door. It also, what we've developed there is knowledge of crop growth rates and yields. So what we can offer to farmers is not just a crop plan, but if we need 600 pounds of tomatoes every week for 10 weeks, we can tell that farmer when they need to plant in order to get that yield. And we have all that data for about 70 crops at this point. So we're trying to simplify and mitigate some of the biggest challenges for small-scale farming, and we've developed this data and this system that essentially offers that. And so for the farmer, they don't have to worry about marketing. They can just grow this. And for a number of my farmers, this is not the only thing they're growing. So what it's given them is a foundation of income that keeps the lights on, and then they can start to innovate in other places. So, for example, my favorite farmer, Vince Owens, who was one of our original trainees in Mansfield, he started with one microfarm, and he made enough money to set up a second microfarm, and then he made enough money to set up a third. And so he's got 2 working microfarms that fulfill and put the lights on, but he also grows edible flowers, which are a high market value.
Oh, wow.
And he's also now growing and marketing elephant garlic. And he's been able to take just a few small heads of elephant garlic over the last couple of years, and now he has an entire farm of elephant garlic. And he learned that late fall, the elephant garlic is in demand and the prices go way up. And so he's timing this so that he gets the highest market value for this additional crop. And this is kind of the goal. You create the foundation for these farmers so that they can keep their lights on, so that they can stay in farming, and then that begins to create creative opportunities for them beyond the core farming
That's
itself.
amazing. So you talked a little bit about what you learned from the Mansfield plot. So how has that helped guide you for your Marion implementation and for your future?
Yeah, so the learning for us was actually this really challenging problem, which is how do you take beginning farmers and put them in a position where they can be successful? For the system is part of it, but so is horticultural commercial horticulture training. And so we've developed a training program that's 2 years long that takes someone who maybe has had a backyard garden, maybe has done some, maybe has done none at all, and walks them through all the steps of commercial horticulture so that by the end of that 2 years, they're in a position to move on to a microfarm of their own and not be the most professional farmer ever, because anybody who farms knows that that never happens, but to be in a position to know how to problem solve effectively and to be able to be successful beyond that. So we've got this training program and we've got this community engagement program where we work with community leaders, we host events, and we bring together the coalition of institutions and individuals that are necessary to help something like this come into being. We brought that knowledge to Marion, and so we've got a microfarm on the Harding High School, and we've got a K through 12 agricultural program that helps students become exposed to agriculture as a potential, and if by the time they get to high school they want to do agriculture, they have this microfarm where they can begin to train and learn on that. Here we trained about a dozen farmers. There were a series of, as often happens, some mishaps and some funding shortages, and so we weren't able to create the cooperative here, but several of the farmers that we've trained are now growing for the cooperative in Mansfield, so they've been able to get access to the market. And the long-term hope there is that we get enough critical mass of small farmers here in Marion that they can create their own aggregation cooperative and become part of what we hope to become a regional system of local cooperatives.
Absolutely. Well, we are going to be taking a short break, and we will be right back.
Hi, I'm Peyton Manning, and I'm partnering with the American Red Cross this year to tackle blood shortages. Giving blood's important because every 2 seconds, someone actually needs blood, and unfortunately, only like 3% of the U.S. population donates. So we have to step up to give and to make sure there's plenty of blood available for those in need. Visit redcrossblood.org to get in the game and make an appointment to give.
Between here and there, but I'm thankful for the journey. The journey got me here. Just watch and see what God can do.
Jesus, there's something about the name of Jesus.
God handled it all. God fixed it all. His plan was mercy, love, and I'm on my way.
Best in Southern Gospel is found right here on COACD Radio.
Got one of these hanging on the wall? You're qualified. One of these? You're qualified too. Qualified. Yep, qualified. Because if you know how to put up anything in your home, you're qualified to save lives by installing free smoke alarms in your community. Go to soundthealarm.org to find a volunteer event near you.
Welcome back, everyone, to Public Affairs. We are now back from our break. So, Kip, what has been the most surprising or rewarding aspects of working with the younger students in agriculture education?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's been really part of my passion through all of this. I worked with elementary school and middle school kids in these schoolyard gardens, and then seeing this program grow up, as you pointed out, River Valley, you mentioned that to me on the break, as well as here in Marion. Watching the kids get exposed to this, many of us know that our kids are not aware of agriculture at this point. They're not aware of where their food came from. The kind of famous metaphor is the kid thinks they come from the supermarket. And those of us who farm know that they come from the ground and they come from hard work. That exposure seems to be transformational for kids. They are so excited about the idea, and we saw this over and again in St. Petersburg, that they could put a seed in the ground and a few months later they had food that was coming out. There was something almost mystically beautiful for it. So watching young people get connected back to Mother Nature through food, for me, is ultimately fulfilling. And what I see in the kids is it gives them a better, broader understanding of the nature of the world that they live in, which I believe ultimately empowers them. And we see this over and again, the excitement. Kids just get they get moved by the reality of plant food coming out of the soil.
Yeah.
It's really
I'm glad you said exposure, because I remember I was in class and we talked about food labeling. You don't know versus organic or GMO or all of that. You don't know how that food got to your plate, so it's kind of nice for that.
Well, and so much of the food that kids encounter actually comes in a box, and it doesn't have any resemblance to food itself. And so this is, and we all know this, that boxed food, that processed food is just not as healthy for kids. We did a program in Florida where we had not only the growing of the food, but would have the kids harvest their vegetables and come in and prepare a meal with it. And what their parents reported back to us is when they went to the supermarket, they went to the produce aisle and they wanted those items. So it helps to encourage healthy eating as a lifestyle as
Absolutely. So where do you see this project heading in the next 5 to 10 years? Are these plans to bring the model to other towns or larger in the state?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I thought when I did this project that we would finish in Mansfield and then I'd be done. I could write up my research report and I could go back to my teaching. And then I got asked by the university to give it a second try in Marion because they felt this was a really good, from the university perspective, this is a really good community engagement project. And while I was working on the Marion project, I started to get phone calls and texts and emails from people in Toledo and Dayton, down at Antioch University, in Cincinnati. Hey, we've heard about the microfarm project. How do we do that too? So I started consulting a little bit with these communities, and when it got to the point where there was an opportunity for a contract, I learned, I actually knew this and had forgotten, everything I've learned in this project, the Ohio State University owns as their intellectual property, but they are more than happy to license that to me. So over the past year, I've been working with Ohio State University to create the specific intellectual property that was created and to launch a brand new organization called the American Farm Initiative that is going to be available later this year to go out and consult with any community who's interested in doing this, and to help communities walk through this process. Our goal, just because of the interest that came with no marketing whatsoever, our thought is there is a lot of communities that would be interested in having a sustainable local food system in their community. So the demand exists. And our goal is to move first across Ohio to any community that's interested, and then across the upper Midwest. And if other people learn about it and want to take it on, we'd be happy to teach any community of this. We think, and I believe this very deeply, that farming is an essential part of community life. We've taken farming out of community life, and we've lost community cohesion as a result. We want to move farming back into community life and create a sustainable food system that allows those communities and really the magic that happens in a small farm to be a part of that, and to help renew and restore some of what was lost in the last 30, 35 years.
Absolutely. You said a little bit about communities that are interested in this, but what advice would you give to other communities or universities looking to replace a similar model?
Yeah, and so first you need the farmers. This is my mantra. I've got an article out that's called First You Need the Farmers. I think the biggest lesson that I learned in this process of developing this is that we often in the university, even in well-meaning community groups, think that first you need the community garden, first you need a place where you can grow, and then they raise money and then they build a community garden that has all of these ambitions. We're going to teach kids, we're going to give away food, we're going to sell food, we're going to train farmers. Nobody thought about what it took to keep that site going in the first place, right? And so my mantra is, it's nice to have a community garden. It's nice to have these ambitions, but if you don't orient them around creating successful small farms who can keep their lights on and who can sustain themselves, you're going to find yourself in a position where you have a community garden that you have to go chasing after funding for year after year, that you can't get enough volunteers to run. And the statistics and data are clear on this. Most of those establishments last 5 to 7 years before they burn out and they turn into something else. So my goal for any community who wants to do this is long-term success, is long-term sustainability, and you do that by putting successful farms and farmers, first you need the farmers, to work, making enough income from what they're selling. This model helps to facilitate that so that they stay in business forever. And this is what we found in Mansfield. We didn't build that system to do anything else but to prove that the microfarm model works. But we now have there a 12-acre community farm that hosts a farmer's market every Thursday night, that does farm to school with kids, that does work release with the nearby prison, that trains neighborhood people to become farmers themselves, and that sits as this gem in the middle of the North End and sustains itself because it's built on a sustainable farming system. And so I say that to community after community. First, you need the farmers. Once you have the farmers, you can have everything else that you want out of a local food system.
I think you put that very nicely.
Thank you.
So you talked about the next 5 to 10 years with this project. So how do you envision the university's research and student involvement into the long-term sustainability of the program?
Yeah, lots of intersections that are taking place there. So we work with students in Columbus and have them come up. We've got internships and all kinds of engagement opportunities. I also work with a whole cadre of OSU Extension educators who are interested in urban farming, urban agriculture, and small-scale farming. And the American Farm Initiative, our goal is kind of two-part. We have a for-profit consulting side and we have a nonprofit research side. And what we want to do on that research side, funded by the for-profit side, is to engage more agricultural researchers in small farm and urban ag research. We don't know enough about this scale. We often, our ag school, for very good reasons, economic reasons, focuses on the large commercial farms, the commodity agriculture, and we're doing great work in that space. We're not doing as much intensely in how does a small farm, how does a 5-acre farm, a 10-acre farm stay alive? What should they be growing? What are the techniques that can be used, et cetera? A lot of that stuff is done outside of the university. I want to bring that into the university and get some robust research on that. The other thing we want to research, so I'm a historian, and what I've noticed is we don't have a lot of good histories of the place of small farming in American life. And so I want to launch an initiative to encourage historians as well to move into small farming space and urban agriculture space in order to provide us with a better understanding of that history, because we're finding ourselves, like we've seen in Mansfield and we're stimulating here in Marion, this creates community. Well, if there were always small farmers nearby, how did that work? What kind of community did that create? So we want to learn from history, and then we want to learn with the agricultural sciences from the places where we're practicing this now in order to make this even more robust, even more sort of data-driven for the farmers themselves.
Absolutely. Well, Kip, it's been really nice talking with you. Before we get ready to wrap up this interview, is there anything you'd like to add that we may have missed, or a closing statement for the audience of any kind?
Yeah, well, I think that I think we have undervalued farming. I think that this ultimately is a tragedy for American culture and for American communities. I think we need the large commercial farms, we need the commodity agriculture, but I even think those farmers are alienated from the practice itself. And the practice itself has got this really magical quality. So I'll tell a little vignette about what we've done in Mansfield. In addition to our community farm, we've got what's called Flourish Farm, which is a 2-acre farm that has put farming back into the prisons there. It's at Richland County Correctional Institute. And it's difficult for the men to kind of get permission to get out there, but it's a very sought after. So we have between 8 and 12 men every year. And I go out there and visit them over the course of the season. And to the person, those men tell me that they have been transformed, that their interior has been transformed by the very act of going out there and growing peppers and tomatoes and other things for market. And you can see it in their eyes when they describe. They look out at the field and they say, look at what I've done. And we've heard from the warden there that since we've brought this farm into this space, the tenor inside, so 8-10 guys, changed the tenor inside. It's calmer, it's more peaceful. Wow. So I would like to get some research around this, but I'm absolutely convinced by that repeated experience, I see it with the kids as well, that there's something almost sacred in farming that's bigger than us, that touches us in ways that I can't as a scholar talk about, but as a human being I can see. And it's that magic that we need to bring back to our communities, that we need to bring back to our life in the United States. And I think the kind of radical loss of small farming wasn't just the deindustrialization that kind of pulled the heart out of us. I think it got pulled out of us earlier than that when small farming began to disappear in the United States. And if I can bring that spirit back, if I can create another strong, healthy, engaged community, I'll feel like I've done something of purpose.
Absolutely.
Important to me.
I think you're doing a lot for the community. The prisoners, the students, the community members.
And the farmers, we can't forget the farmers.
Absolutely. You're doing a lot for the community, and I love seeing it. So you keep doing great work there.
Thank you, Kayleigh.
So again, thank you for coming out.
My pleasure.
And as always, you're watching Public Affairs, and I am your host, Kayleigh Egan. Thank you.